The Sutra of Relationships, the Law of Inheritance. The best inheritance is to teach by example how to be happy. The most important thing we can do for our children is to be happy ourselves. Children will not follow our words, but our example. Let's recall the famous monologue by Svanetsky, "Son, I didn't become this, nor did I become that. I'll pass on my experience to you." If a woman gives up her personal life, career, and hobbies for the sake of her child, sooner or later, she will hear, "Mother, what have you achieved to be giving me advice?" Therefore, the ideal model of the parent-child relationship is to show by personal example how to live and how to be happy. First, we will pass on to them our understanding of happiness. Second, by focusing on ourselves and not only on the children, we move forward, achieve something in life, and become much more interesting and authoritative for them. Then, we can say, "I've gone through this, learn from my example." In truth, children don't need much, normal conditions for life and development, and happy parents nearby. That's why it's not always worth preserving a family for the sake of the child at any cost. It's better for children to see calm, satisfied parents living separately than to hear their mother and father arguing every day. Later, they will inevitably repeat that in their own lives. But if they see a model of a happy family before them, with an understanding of how to build healthy relationships, they will experience love, acceptance, respect, and support. No matter what we tell them, they will unconsciously copy our behavior and strategies for achieving happiness. For example, no one could call Alexander Dumas a great father. His son was born out of wedlock to a simple seamstress, Catherine Labbe. In the birth certificate, under father, Dumas' name was absent. Despite her low social standing, Catherine was a worthy, caring, and loving mother. The child grew up in a peaceful atmosphere of a modest, yet tidy home. However, when young Alexander Dumas turned 7, his father took him away from Catherine. Moreover, after taking the boy from his loving mother, the great writer didn't keep him. Instead, he placed him in a private boarding school. Dumas didn't give his son anything that we traditionally associate with a good father. He didn't read him bedtime stories or stay by his side during childhood illnesses. He lived a happy, rich creative life, having written 100,000 pages of work. His books have been translated into hundreds of languages. To this day, he remains the most read French author. As a result, Dumas' son, following in his father's footsteps, became a writer and succeeded in his own right. The son of the famous author of The Three Musketeers became the author of the equally famous The Lady of the Camellias. In his youth, Dumas the younger loved his mother more and remained devoted to her until her death. But in his mature years, Dumas came to appreciate his father's role, acknowledging his contributions. "Dear great man, naive and kind, you shared your glory with me, just as you shared your money when I was young and lazy. I am happy that I finally have the chance to publicly honor you, to pay tribute to you in front of everyone, and with all my sonly love, to embrace you in the presence of the future." Dumas the elder gave his son the most important inheritance. He lived a happy and fruitful life. And Dumas the younger brilliantly used that inheritance. Bad examples are contagious. Children quickly and naturally adapt to happiness, for they themselves by nature are joy and happiness. Victor Hugo. We all come from childhood. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. If parents do not care for themselves, but only for their children, writes psychologist Muriel Durham, their life becomes relative, their self-esteem steadily declines, and relationships wither. This approach can lead to a nervous breakdown, depression, and other psychosomatic illnesses. Moreover, such parents indirectly shift the responsibility for their own well-being onto their children. A classic example is when generations of doctors want their child to pursue medicine. Choosing a different life path makes them deeply unhappy, even though the child may dream of music or design. In this situation, what should have been a gift, parental love, becomes a burden for the children. It becomes very difficult for them to meet family expectations. Humans are designed in such a way that children are biologically programmed to accept guidance from their parents, especially when there is a strong emotional bond. Happy, calm, loving parents can provide their children with the necessary support, becoming role models that their children will want to follow and passing on experiences that will help them in the future. The importance of exploring experience in its entirety was first written about by the German philosopher Wilhelm Dilthey in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He argued that experience cannot be reduced to any scheme, it can only be described. And for a correct description, Dilthey considered empathy to be the best aid, literally living into the feelings and thoughts of another, trying to stand in their shoes and imitate them. Imitation is the primary safeguard of the species, said the well-known ethologist and Soviet physiologist L.A. Orbeli. Most often, the imitation of behavioral and psychological reactions happens unconsciously, and this process is especially active in childhood, during the formation of personality. Although cultural continuity can bypass biological inheritance and lead to very rapid evolution, the products of cultural evolution are still subject to natural selection. Therefore, the most valuable thing for the survival of offspring is the transmission of personal experience, culture, and traditions, rather than material inheritance. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. You cannot teach a person to be happy, but you can raise them in a way that they will be. Alexander Pushkin. In psychology, there is a phenomenon known as imprinting, the fixation of characteristics of objects in memory during the formation or correction of innate behavioral acts. Imprinting occurs during a strictly defined period of life, usually in childhood and adolescence, and its consequences are often irreversible. In animals, such imprinting can influence future habitat choices, mating, and social behavior. For example, the song sparrow will only remember its parents' song if it hears it during a sensitive period of development between the 10th and 50th days of life. If individual chicks are deprived of hearing their species' song during this period, they will never learn this specific melody throughout their lives. For some animals, behavior is shaped through more complex learning. Some forms of tool use spread across primate populations through observational learning. Similarly, young chimpanzees learn to build nests by mimicking the actions of adults. However, if the parents disappear for some reason, leaving behind a nest they built, the young animal will not be able to use it as a model for acquiring building skills. The chain of cultural inheritance will be hopelessly broken. Like father, like son. If people speak badly of your children, it means they are speaking badly of you. Vasily Sukhumlinsky. Often, important experiences are passed on not only by our biological parents but also by our spiritual parents, the teachers life sends us. American philosopher and social psychologist George Herbert Mead argued that we acquire social experience from significant others through all possible means, consciously or unconsciously learning to perform various roles. Ludwig Wittgenstein described this situation in his theory of language games. Wittgenstein noted that learning the rules of any game can happen in various ways, but it always relies on the support of a group that regulates acceptable norms of behavior for each role. In all Abrahamic religions, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, children are seen as a gift from God, and parenting is viewed as a way to lead the child to God. The Quran states, Allah gave you from yourselves wives, and from your wives gave you children and grandchildren, and provided you with good things. Quran 16:72. Therefore, parents are commanded to care for their children and make them happy. Quran 4:36. The family plays a leading role in raising a person, becoming the first and foremost school for the child, and parents are the primary teachers. Hence, it is crucial for the family to have the right spiritual atmosphere, filled with love, kindness, and care for one another. Good upbringing is the best inheritance one can leave for children. The goal of Muslim parents is primarily to raise good Muslims, and only secondarily to ensure they become good doctors, lawyers, and programmers. Proper Islamic upbringing is considered a form of worship in Islam, which imposes a certain responsibility on parents. By setting an example for their children, they themselves must be good Muslims. A child will not heed their words if their actions contradict what they say. In Orthodoxy, the principle of inheritance, raising children by example, can be illustrated by the words of Saint Seraphim of Sarav, "Acquire the Holy Spirit yourself, and thousands around you will be saved." The biblical sage, King Solomon, once said, "Train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old he will not turn from it." Proverbs 22:6. Christ introduced a new idea into the question of relationships with children. Jesus called a child to him, placed the child among them, and said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." Matthew 18:3. The kingdom of heaven, according to the Gospel, is synonymous with a paradisiacal state, that is, happiness. Philippians 4:13. The way to achieve happiness, in this place of divine revelation, is to enter into a state of childlikeness. The Lord requires us to become like children, that is, not to return to childhood, as you might think, but to renounce malice so that we have childlike simplicity. Saint Gregory of Nyssa. The goal of a pious Christian is to enter the happiness of the kingdom of heaven themselves and to guide their children toward that happiness, paradoxically learning from their children the proper attitude. Like root, like offspring. Children need a role model more than they need criticism. Joseph Joubert. The boy fell from the horse because the father put him on it crookedly. The development of a child's spiritual powers in early childhood requires no effort if the family itself lives a spiritual life. On the other hand, it is almost impossible if the family is spiritually impoverished. It is in the Christian family that its great mystery, as the Apostle Paul says, unfolds with exceptional force the mystery of its spiritual path as a path to God. The sacrament of marriage, as understood by Orthodox consciousness, is not just a blessing or sanctification of family life but the revelation of the spiritual power that is always present in marriage but cannot act in the family without grace. The Christian family contains grace that inexhaustibly resides in marriage, and its radiance permeates the entire fullness of family relations. Therefore, from this inexhaustible grace present in Christian marriage, one must derive the deep religious significance of the family in the spiritual maturation of the child. Everything that diverts family relations from this spiritual, gracious beginning weakens the influence of the family on the religious maturation of the child. Paraphrasing Saint Nicodemus the Hagiorite, happy Christian parents are known not only by what they say but are revealed by their deeds. A tree is known by its fruit. It is better to be silent and be, than to speak and not be. The kingdom of God is not in words, but in power. All changes must start with us. Laura McHugh. In his treatise Traditions of Jewish Education, Rabbi Reuven Piatigorsky writes that a good parent, a successful educator, or teacher is, first and foremost, a good person. In Judaism, a good person is defined as one who meets the criterion, do not do to others what you do not want done to yourself. According to the Torah, there is no special treatment for children, there is only the treatment of people, both one's own and others. One's own are distinguished from others only by the degree of responsibility for their fate and an innate habit of loving them, which is significant. This fundamental rule can be formulated as follows: our child is as autonomous and independent as any other person, including us, their parents. Therefore, we cannot violate their right to self-expression in any way. All we can do is help them in this choice by generously sharing our own experiences without imposing anything on them or suppressing anything within them. A child is essentially an adult who has not yet grown up. There should be no contempt for a child simply because they are small. We should not talk about what qualities we want to instill in our children. The Torah asserts that we will always instill in them only what we ourselves possess, but no more. Therefore, all talk about responsibility, diligence, neatness, and honesty will remain mere words if these qualities are not present in the parents. The older generation may declare profound truths, but if they are not confirmed by personal example, the child will not accept them. The great Russian writer Leo Tolstoy, a wise educator and father of 5, wrote, "All moral education of children boils down to setting a good example. Live well, or at least try to live well, and you will, to the extent of your success in living well, properly educate your children." Education seems complex only as long as we want to educate our children or anyone else without educating ourselves. But if you understand that we can only educate others through ourselves, then the question of education vanishes, and only one question remains: how should one live oneself? Be truthful even to the child, keep your promises, otherwise, you will teach them to lie. A righteous mother is a stone fence. Diligent parents' children are not lazy. Buddhist teachings also provide recommendations on parenting. Buddha speaks both about the duties of parents to their children and the duties of children to their parents. According to Buddhist traditions, parents are an undeniable example for their children. Children should be worthy of receiving their parents' legacy. In modern Buddhist families, parents prefer to raise children based on personal examples and their own behavior. Children are taught to share and think of others. They are not shielded from experiences that shape character, with the adult serving as support and a safety net. Currently, Buddhist parents do not aim to make their children Buddhists. They provide them with the choice and the opportunity to consciously embark on this path in adulthood. The main goal for parents is to instill in their children a love for all living beings and an understanding of the law of karma. In this way, the child develops an awareness that any action will eventually return to them. These pedagogical maxims are universal. In the Nepali folktale The Clever Boy, it is illustrated how important it is for parents to plant seeds of goodness and set an example for their children. There was once an old man named Dyasin. He had a son and a grandson. The son was named Nasthursan, and the grandson was named Shalakinsan. When the old man turned 70, his wife passed away. He gave the keys to the house to his daughter-in-law. From that moment, tough times began for the venerable Dyasin. The new mistress fed him poorly, drove him out of his room, and the old man had to sleep in the cold cellar. The once wealthy old man now faced a pitiable fate. As the saying goes, as one is, so are the sledges, and whoever is neglected from the cradle will never find a place in life. One day, old Dyasin lay on a torn mat in the cellar and thought about his bitter fate. He remembered the time when his son was born, how he glowed with happiness, and tears of joy flowed down his cheeks. Now he shed tears again, but they were tears of great sorrow. The old man felt a pang of injustice, jumped up, kicked the mat in anger, and began to loudly drum with a stick on an empty barrel that served as his table. Fortunately, on that day his son and daughter-in-law were away on business, and only the grandson Shalakhinson, a bright and intelligent boy for his age, was at home. He heard the old man banging on the barrel, ran downstairs, and asked why Grandpa Diason was hitting the innocent barrel. "Do you want to know, my dear grandson, what the barrel has done wrong? Listen then. Your grandfather used to eat rice like everyone else, at the table, but now he has to sip thin gruel alone, placing the bowl on this old barrel. So, I am venting my grievance on it. Please, grandson, do not be as cruel as your parents." And the old man cried again. Shalakhinson's heart ached with sympathy for his grandfather. He thought for a moment and said, "Grandpa, you will have to drum on the empty barrel again when father and mother come home. But do not be upset by anything I say." In the evening, when the son and daughter-in-law returned home, the old man, as agreed, began to bang loudly. "Hey, old wreck!" shouted the grandson. "Aren't you tired of banging on the barrel? What do you want?" "I am hungry," replied the grandfather from the cellar. "Ah, I see. Well, let you die of hunger, but leave our barrel alone. I still need it. If you break it, how will I feed father and mother when they grow old?" The son, Nesthursson, heard these words and began to reflect. Indeed, he was treating his father poorly, and when the time came, his own son would follow this bad example. Isn't it better to earn a good old age through kindness? It is said that from then on, he began to care for his old father. Thus, young Shalakhinson taught his parents wisdom. For our children, there is no point in lectures, admonitions, and punishments. Only our own example has educational power, laying the foundation in the child's soul that will form the framework of their entire life. But example is not only about beautiful gestures and words we demonstrate on occasion. It is our daily life, habits, speech, and tone of voice, attitude toward people, work, and culture. These seemingly small details are the main educational factors. Our children will always see us as examples in everything good and bad, whether we want them to or not. The foundation of well-being is the ability to remain in a state of love for oneself and the world. It is a state of harmony and happiness. It involves doing everything in life with quality, honestly, cleanly, and beautifully. And confidence that no matter what situation arises, we will resolve it gracefully. A person's well-being is not dependent on the material world. Our state of inner harmony does not depend on the presence or absence of material goods. We may not have everything we want, but we can be grateful for what we already have. Our children will see that gratitude is the ability to give selflessly, without expecting anything in return. By learning to give and share, we become prosperous, ready to receive blessings from the external world. This is our lesson and inheritance for our children to be actively happy and grateful to fate. If we want our children to be happy, we must be happy ourselves, laying the groundwork for a full, rich, and interesting life. Like uncles, so are the children.